established the Sudan United Mission SUM British branch, now Action Partners, who first arrived in 1904. GINDIRI, located in Mangu local government area of Plateau State, was not known from the onset until the coming of the SUM missionaries. For every beginning, there is a history behind it, or else what can you say of a remote community which never thought it could be reached not only with the gospel of Christ, but become the foundation and incubator of highly resourceful persons? Boys Secondary School, GINDIRI.
The Sudan United Mission and the church that had grown out of it realized they needed to have an educated leadership. And they said the next stage, we've had primary schools, now we must have a secondary school, and from that we may find some who will go on to train as pastors. That was their view. It was a time when the government was giving grants. The British government were just about moving out of Nigeria, and they were giving grants for this sort of school building, and the churches were very keen, and they selected the boys for the school.
The school emerged from the GINDIRI Middle School, which was established in 1944, which later transformed into a boys' boarding school in 1950. The boys' boarding school started even as other institutions were already in place. They include the Bible school, the women's school for pastors' wives, practicing school, later demonstration school, as well as the teacher training college and the vernacular teachers' school. Established with a common philosophy which is based on the book of Psalms chapter 43 verse 3, "O send your light and your truth, let them lead me," the institutions are to provide sound education to men and women. In the boys' secondary school, as in other mission-owned institutions in GINDIRI, the boys are shown the light so that they could turn to be light to others. Students are challenged with the claims of Christ, who is the light of the world, and the truth that leads to righteous living, as well as a faithful service. The intention is to lead the young men so that they increase in wisdom and stature and in favor of God. With this objective, through the humble and resourceful leadership of different principals and staff, came Owen David Wilmshurst, the first principal, popularly called among his students as OD. OD Wilmshurst, principal, started the boys' school in 1950 with a students' enrollment of 26 boys. The boys' secondary school was the first Protestant voluntary agency school in the whole of northern Nigeria. It was the fourth secondary school in the region. At inception, the principal himself, a teacher of mathematics and chemistry, introduced arts, science, and vocational subjects which were taught within the period he served as head teacher. Of note, during OD's time, Boys Secondary School GINDIRI was the only school that offered agriculture in the whole of the West African sub-region. It was therefore not surprising that the first set of students numbering 16 sat for the West African Examination Council WASC scored 100%. Notable among the pioneer students are late Commissioner of Police Joseph Dechi Ngomauk, late Ayuba Tense, a colonel, James Lott, Edward Aleye-Deno, Professor Ochapa Onazi, former Vice Chancellor, University of Jos, Johanna Sarki, David Abifarin, Sunday Akimumi, Timotheus Pwajok, Iliya Bisala, Musa Nyam, Stephen Ezechuku, and Ezekiel Toma were some prominent members of the second set. The third set had the likes of Obed Ikwebu, Patrick Lott, Emmanuel Okeke, Olani Pauline Olumi, and Christopher Ojo, amongst others. Of note is the composition of the students who came not only from the host community, but all over the country, without discrimination, as both Christians and Muslims are admitted on merit. Owen David Wilmshurst was born in 1914 in Croydon, South London, to a family of devout Christians and was baptized in 1929. 3 years later, David went to King's College, London University and graduated with a BSc in chemistry. He subsequently obtained a diploma in education. Not done with the search for the Golden Fleece, he attended Livingston Medical College, where he was trained in basic medical and surgical care in the missionary training colony in Norwood. Connie Brand, who later became his wife and life partner, was engaged to him before he traveled out of Nigeria in 1940 after the outbreak of the war. By 1942, plans were made for the establishment of a secondary school, and David went there initially as a teacher in the primary boarding school and in the vernacular language teachers training school.
When I got to college, I joined the Christian Union in London, and there was a group of students who were committed to go to the mission field if they were called. So I joined that group, and we were committed. We waited to see if God was going to call us. Well, one night at home in Croydon, I was listening to the Christian service on the radio, and they read the passage from Isaiah 6, and it starts off, "In the year that the king Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up." And then the prophet writes down, "I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for me? Who will go for us?" And at that point in my life, I was in college, I was training to be a teacher, and I'd come to the point about the missionary thing. Would I stay in England and teach, or would I go overseas? And here was this verse of scripture coming, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?"
Connie later joined David in Nigeria, but was first posted to Panyam and Vom.
I was not allowed by our government to leave the country during the war. That was the situation in those days, unless you were in the forces, or you were going abroad to do something important. You had to stay where you were in England. So I waited until nearly at the end of the war. I was released to go to Nigeria.
David and Connie were joined in holy matrimony in GINDIRI in 1945 by Pastor David Lott in the corner classroom of the old Bible school, as there was no church building yet available.
And in the meantime, we were corresponding. A lot of the letters were lost in the war, but we did correspond, and we were preparing one day to be married. Well, I travelled in convoy when I was finally allowed to go. It took 5 weeks to get to Nigeria.
At the beginning, when the GINDIRI Boys Secondary School was founded in 1950, both David, who became its pioneering principal, and Connie, his wife, were teachers in the school. The house on the hill above the school was built by Odie, and it became the principal's house. Between 1946 and 1952, 5 children were born to the Wilmshursts. Except for Elizabeth, who was born in England, the rest were given birth to on the plateau. The pioneer principal spent 6 years, and in 1956, Odie was moved from the school to become warden of GINDIRI compound schools. He was then succeeded by other missionaries such as Mr. G. Deasley, followed by Mr. M.B. Cotton, P.F. Bradford, and Derek Joy before the era of indigenous principles. GYS Dawulung led the roll call of indigenous principals and was succeeded by Mr. Dung Pandung with YS Dimka, now the head teacher. It is on record that David and Connie, his wife, were the ones that produced the famous GINDIRI logo, as well as its motto, for light and truth. The motto, as created by OD, has created through the school high-quality human resources with the fear of God, who have distinguished themselves in different fields of human endeavor. These achievements and the memories of their effort hold a special place for the ODs. These are the voices of the Wilmshurst.
We would urge young people to consider, what does God want me to do? Work here or there? In this country or overseas?
If the Lord has called you to follow him, it's your duty to teach your children that they need to seek the Lord's will for their lives. Support them if they want to go overseas as missionaries or in any other way to take up full Christian service.
Celebrating a mentor, father to many, a grandfather in his 100 years on earth is something those who went to BSS GINDIRI would not want to miss. Some of the old students who are still alive believe that for whatever they are and whatever they stand for is because of the foundation that was laid by the centenarian OD.
He was a very strict and disciplined person. He's not given to laughing much, but he laughs occasionally. But you could see seriousness in his face all the time. But in the midst of that seriousness, you can also see humility. And you know that his strictness is not because he was being wicked, but was just being principled.
The more I think about what he did, the more I appreciate him. He was a disciplinarian, and the way he brought us up has helped us in our lives. He keeping time, seriously, working hard. He imparted all this to us, and in our life, we appreciated what he has done for us.
As an individual, I hardly ever saw him smile, but I soon got to know that was the impression every other person had. But he loved us, he cared for us, but I think he was very, very strict when it came to discipline. So that was what bred the fear in all of us. You only needed to hear that OD was coming. Either you went into hiding or you behaved yourself when he was coming.
He is somebody who had lectured in the University of London and was a very highly placed man in the University of London. Then he left and came back to start teaching us in Hausa in Primary 3. Very, very down to earth and very, very, very understanding man. People were afraid of him because they thought he had some magic, because you'd be working, he would just appear. But he was Babanyara, so say OD. Yes.
We saw him as a no-nonsense person. Of course, he was teaching our seniors, but we all know him, and he looks very intimidating to us at that time.
O.T. Wilmshurst was a disciplinarian, and